All right, so today we have part 2 of my interview with Flo on Plasmatree. In this one, we're going to specifically cover the noise attenuation plots that it produces, as you see here, and how it can help you dissect and digest all the good data that's in your black box logs.
All right, well, so let's flip into the noise graph. You know, I've used it a while, but I haven't put a video together, and I was hoping we could kind of just step through this. So my take on this one is that, you know, debug mode, raw, you got pitch and yaw. What we want to have your debug mode here is set to notch. Now in newer versions of Betaflight, it's gyro _ scaled, so that they've changed the debug mode there.
Yeah, that makes way more sense than notch.
Yeah. So if you need to change Plasmatree, there's your tip. It's got to look for gyro _ scaled now. So that will be coming at you soon. And then this is after the gyro has filtered it. So any filtering on the gyro. And then this is the D term. Now one of so you can see the noise. Now one of the important things that we'll talk about here in a second is that these, you know, that people need to recognize any release prior to 0.52, I think we're at now. Is that right?
Yeah.
0. Yeah. That these are auto-scaled. So when you're looking at this noise, you know, 10 to the first is scaled as blue here, but is orange here. So this is although this looks like more noise than what you have on your raw.
Yeah, that was something that got people confused.
Right. But it's not, because it's just the scaling's different. And because it confused me a lot. I'm like, how is that possible? How do I have more noise on my, and then you see the top, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's right. So then this is how much noise is getting through your D term. So you can see from your gyro to your D term. And now, is this after the D term filtering or before the D term filtering?
It's the pure D term thing that's saved in the black box. So that's really what's going into the PID sum, I think.
Yeah, so the D term traces. So it'd be after the filtering. So it's after, so you can kind of get a sense of between your gyro trace and then your D term trace, you know, how much more D term filtering, which may or may not be a good thing. We can touch on that. I know you were looking at that. See, I'll ask if you have any results on that later. But and then here, this was essentially a graph. Now the shaded lines in the background here, is that gyro? Is that the debug gyro noise, or what is that?
That's the gyro trace on the right. It's
so this is this one.
Yeah, right. It's basically averaged sideways.
Gotcha. Now is this the transmission? Can you explain what transmission is?
The transmission is calculated from the raw input, so the debug in this case, and the gyro. And it's basically just gyro divided by debug. So how much is getting through? If everything from the debug is getting through to the gyro, it will be 1.
So it would be 100%.
Yeah, right.
Right. So if the filters are, so it's essentially showing what your filter percentage is, how much of the noise from your raw noise to your gyro. Yeah, and which makes sense here, because on this specific craft, I have a dynamic notch on, which sits around the mid throttle, you know, where you're normally cruising forward. So that's around 250 hertz to 300. You know, it moves around, but not that much. And then this is the peak. When I go full throttle, I have a static notch up here. So you can see those. To me, what I'm seeing at least is this is the dip from where the notch is for the dynamic notch is settling most of the time, and sometimes it's over here as well a little bit. Most of the time it's right here. And then you can see that static notch staying right there all the time. And then from here on out.
You can even see in the color plot on the right. And it's also visible in the D term because it's the same data, except for the D term low pass. But on like right about 400, above 400, you see a dark horizontal line.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, so what's you're saying that's your notch?
Yeah, that's the static notch. It stays on the same position all the time.
Okay, so that's really filtering any noise out across the entire band.
Yeah, right. and the motor noise stops right below it, beneath it, there.
Right.
If you go to full throttle, it just hits up to that band. In other logs, you can really see dark lines through the horizontal lines. That's always the setting notches.
Yeah, and I wanted to pop over here to just show how that would look in black box here if I run a spectrograph, and it always takes, I should have ran this a second ago, but it always takes a little bit the first time. Maximize this screen. To me, you know, what we're seeing here, this is my throttle band, essentially, for noise. At the end of the day, this is where I'm spending most of my time, in this log, actually most of my time was spent up near full throttle. But this is the noise coming from my motors, and it's ranging. If I would spend equal amount of time all the way up through the range from about 30% throttle all the way up to 100, this peak would have a clean transition all the way up. It wouldn't dip down like this. I believe the reason this is dipping down is because I'm just not spending a lot of time at 70, 80% throttle. I'm usually transitioning right through it up to 100. For my take on this, and let me know if you think otherwise, that this spectrum essentially equates to this in the log. And you can see the same results. There's a peak here, and then not so much of it, and it's kind of dim in between, and then another peak up here. And that's showing you that percentage.
The dimming in between is real. It's there's less resonance in your quad at that point. The peak, like right about 200 and right above 400, is a higher mode that you're exciting with your motor noise, and at 300 you're not exciting this resonance mode, so there's less noise. The spectrum that you see here that you see here is non-cumulative, so it doesn't matter if you spend more time on a certain throttle position. This will be it won't change the result. It's taken care of during the calculation. Yeah.
My quad naturally resonates at 250 to 410.
Yeah, it's pretty much double the frequency, so it's a higher mode.
Yeah. Gotcha. So I'm hitting the natural resonance frequency at those two spots. What you mentioned, you know, it's doubled, and it's not exactly double, because at least in my experiences, because a lot of times I'll look for that resonance, and they're like, oh, it's double. It's like, well, it's generally kind of doubled. So don't.
Yeah, it's a broad thing. Also, with higher throttle, you change the static behavior of your frame. You put more pressure on it, and so this also influences the whole thing. But you often see this doubling in frequency, also visible here in the.
Because ultimately we want to push the resonance frequencies as high as possible, right? Because then the filters can attack them better with less latency. Have you ever messed with that or thought about that?
A stiff light frame will have high resonance frequencies.
Yeah, so basically anything that you would attach is going to lower it. So keep stuff off of it. And that's the same thing for soft mounting.
That might also induce resonance bands. It can, but on the other hand, it also limits the amount of transduced noise from the motors. So it's always a trade-off, and you have to find the best spot.
Yeah, and I've seen that when you soft mount, the noise peaks move down, but they don't move down a lot. Your noise amplitude goes down more than what the peak goes down. It's not like the amplitude might go down by 75% or something of that nature, but then in the motor, that peak might move down 10 hertz. Well, that 10 hertz isn't going to kill you if you can whack off 25% of the noise amplitude, things of that nature. So another question I had, I guess, on this, back to this transmission. The transmission goes up here at the higher frequencies, and I was. That basically, I took that as, well, the noise floor is so low that's why that percentage is going up. Is that a correct assumption? I mean, why does this go up when low pass filters are applying more?
Yeah, I know. It's something that also startled me. There are different things that can add to this. So as the numbers get smaller and smaller, the precision might get into play. So we have only limited precision during the calculation. And these very high frequencies with very low amplitude are only really small changes that might also be on the same scale as the precision that we have during the calculation in the flight controller.
Right.
And something else I also did a post for on the wiki is this cutoff frequency. If you have data with 32 kilohertz and you log it with 4 kilohertz, you will still see influence from the high frequency noise that you're not able to resolve in your lower frequency bands right here. You can see how the motor noise looks like it reflects on the upper edge.
Right up here.
That's an artifact induced by the fact that the sampling frequency is way lower than the max frequency in the data. And
right.
in your spectrum, also in your black box explorer, you will see this as a peak, but it's not a peak. It will actually go further up in frequency.
Yeah, so you're saying this is the aliasing, this shade here, or this
right.
band through here?
No, the right, that goes down again. You see the motor noise scaling with throttle, hitting the upper edge and reflecting. And that's the same thing. Yeah, it looks like it's reflecting, but it's just an artifact. It's nicely visible in the motor noise, but it happens with all noise there. So you have homogeneous noise with higher frequency, and this is basically still visible in the lower frequencies because your log rate is so low.
Basically, for black box logging rate, I have an SD card, so I'm kind of spoiled. I don't care about the size of the log, so I try to log as high as I can. I currently log at 4K all the time, and the files get big, but whatever. It's on a 16 gig SD card. I've run it at 8, but sometimes it gets spotty. I see that you get up on SD cards at least, and I've never seen anybody log above 8K. I just don't think SD cards can accept the data fast enough, even if you have a good card. If somebody knows of a card that can, they should let me know. Post it in the comments. But so it becomes a issue if you're doing 16 and 32K. On one hand, if you have an SD card, I don't know that, again, if you know of a card that can accept the data at that speed, drop it in the comments. On the other hand, if you have data flash, which can accept those speeds, you're going to fill it up so fast that it's hard to record at such a high speed. Is that your take on that as well? Is there any advice or anything on that?
Yeah, sure. So logging at really high data rates is not practical. It takes forever if you download from the flash. And I essentially posted this concern here with the aliasing, that you just know about it and can account for it. So if you see some strange results that are caused by this, then just don't put too much effort on like here suppressing the 500 peak or something. That's probably not that pronounced in the real data.
So you're saying this? You're saying this on this side of this?
Yeah. It has double the amount of motor noise basically because like above the 400 here, you can see that's exactly the region where it's reflected back, where this artifact adds in.
Right. So this you're saying is probably not real. It's reported there, but that's not actually happening in the flight.
Yeah, at least not that to such an extreme extent.
Right. Gotcha. Okay, and then I guess back to this, just to close this, this down here shows your TPA again, your throttle distribution across the entire flight, so you can kind of see where most of the time it's spent between 40 and 60%. And that's part of this whole non-cumulative thing, because if you do the cumulative spectrogram,
and then divided by this distribution, you get the non-cumulative result. Because you know this on this throttle value, you have this many inputs, this much data from several points where this throttle was happening, and then you divide by it, and you have an average value. So this is something that is needed during the calculation. It's also nice to see where you spend the most time.
Yeah, so it kind of equals out. So essentially you're saying, you know, if you're looking at the spectrograph in black box, that you know, you really got to take into account that this is cumulative noise across the entire flight, where you might have multiple throttle positions giving you this this same resonance frequency or same vibration at that frequency, so on and so forth, where if you're going to Plasmatree, it kind of threads that needle a little bit further.
Yeah, and the peak at 500 is way lower. If you look at on the right, the blue shaded thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's basically the same thing as you're seeing in the Black Box Explorer, but in a non-cumulative way.
Gotcha. Okay. Good. And then the bottom graph is percent throttle, and then this is over the time of the flight, so you can essentially see, you know, where you're pegging it. These are the full throttle moves. Is that right?
Yeah, right. It's for me, it's essentially useful to see what kind of flight this was, because if you see the throttle curve, you know, okay, this was a real flight, this not, and stuff like that.
Let's. I wanted to see if we could just run a log through the newest release. I know you have an auto or a option now for scaling, and I had a question on that, so if you can kind of go through that and digress, and we'll go from there. So I'm going to just basically just drag this log up, hit enter, and put in the.
Yeah, it's actually plot name. It's not pilot, but everybody says pilot now, so that's fine.
Yeah, I just put in the call. I usually do the no for the graph window, but you can do yes or no there. And then this next one. So can you explain what we should be entering here? Yeah.
You should just hit enter. The default values are set to a level that's useful, I think, and also agreeing with the people on the forum. So what this does is it sets the color plot ranges to certain limits, and the first parenthesis you see here is 1 and 10.1 is the limits for the gyro plot. The second one, 1 and 100, is for the debug column. Then for the D term, and the fourth one, the 0 and 4, is for the 2D graph on the right for the noise.
So if I would go through, do one log, and then I wanted to do another log. I'm not going to do that just for sense of time. And I wanted to make sure that it's the same scaling for the next log. Is the default auto? What is? Do I just go through and hit enter again?
The default is default last. It's in parentheses. Like this one is selected and just hit enter. The current setting is this. The auto will be the old auto tuning. But the default setting is just these values that you see here, and these are probably useful.
So are these the selection options up here? The default last, copy, and edit auto?
Yeah. Yeah,
so
the parentheses denote that it's that default last is what's selected right now. You can copy and edit the values. So if you just copy the line with the values and then set, I don't know, 100 as an upper limit for the gyro, you can just put in 100 there, hit enter, and it will be passed. It's kind of hacky to do it like this, but yeah, people wanted it, and you just have to hit enter several times now, and you're done.
I guess, how do I select the different? So right now, if I hit enter, I'm hitting default last, which is mostly what you're going to want almost all the time. But say, for example, I did want to do the copy, edit, or auto.
Then copy the line with the parentheses?
Yeah, I don't think I can. I'd have to enter it back in.
Ah, okay. That sucks. Yeah, I will definitely change this.
Yeah, no. So
or you can just
you basically just have to re-enter it in, like 1, 10.1 or whatever you want to change that to.
Yeah.
So the auto is.
Yeah. So
the
useful thing here is you can just type auto, or anything else will end up at the auto mode. Any false input will bring you the auto mode.
Okay. So yeah. So I would say 99.9% of the time people are just going to use default last. But in the rare
then
case
you can visually compare the results.
Yeah, in the rare case you want to use auto, basically auto is the old functionality, correct? Where it would auto scale based on the log. So if you wanted it to do that to get a better, it gives you more resolution, obviously on your gyro trace.
Right.
If you did want
sometimes
that, you would.
There's really little noise, but then on the other hand, why would you care if there's so little noise? So.
Right. So if you did want to see the older way, you'd do auto, correct?
Yeah.
You type auto here, and if you wanted to do copy and edit, basically you just type in the values that you'd want.
Yeah, or depending on the CMD or how it works. So I can select stuff and just paste it in but I mean it's also Windows 10.
Yeah, well, I'm on Windows 7, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand it works.
So would I enter something?
You need to have the first parenthesis. You missed the first, of all.
What do I need to do here? 2
parentheses at the beginning.
Like that?
Right. Yeah.
Gotcha. Then 10.1. Then close it. Do I need a comma?
Yeah, just like it's written there. Exactly.
Gotcha.
It's passed directly into the code. So if you have a typo or something, you will probably end up at the auto mode. So.
Right. Do they need spaces?
No.
Okay, so just the commas, the parentheses, no spaces are really needed. And then I would assume you don't need to do I don't need to do 100.0. I could just type 100, and then close the front. Okay. All right, yeah, that was it. I just wanted I figured it was something like that, and so I just wanted to kind of hit through that, because I know I had the question when I was looking at it, so I figured we could clear that up.
Yeah, there were several people also asking, and nothing happens. I waited half an hour, but just hit enter.
Well, I appreciate your time. I know you're busy working on this stuff and mixing it up with people in the RC groups. I know when the RC groups first started, you were looking for logs, input and whatnot. It seems like there's a lot more activity. So are you still looking for people's logs and input? Is there any things that you're trying to work on that need help with?
If people see strange things happening or bugs or anything, just give me a heads up, or if they are wondering why this is like that and not like that, like they would expect. I mean, it's not perfect. There's still stuff I can do, and I'm also testing different approaches also to the noise plot, noise analysis. There are different ways how you can do it, and because everything is kind of intertwined in this whole thing. I mean, just listing it by throttle gives you a better view of it, but you can also look at it by the single motor speeds. That will give you a different result. And there are kind of endless possibilities how you can unfold the data to see certain things.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much again for your time, and I'm sure people will give that feedback as we go. And I really appreciate it spending the time with me this afternoon.